Hi, it's Kayce Cover, and somebody was asking about teaching an animal to litter train to a particular area. And this is something I've actually had to do a fair amount of work with. At the University of Maryland, I did it with a bunch of horses. I've done it with zoo animals, and I do it with dogs. And here's a little tiny paper I wrote about it, and I'll just read it in case you're trying to listen to this while you do something else. And it's an excerpt, so the whole thing isn't there. By the way, it's copyrighted 2014. Okay, I find that every dog I have dealt with on this issue so far resolved in 4 days or less just by my naming things, believe it or not. I know this is going to sound really strange. I name four things all with the same word, and you can use whatever word you want to cue urination and defecation. And in this particular case I was addressing, it was a dog that was both blind and deaf, but it would still work. So I used the word crock, and I named the act of urinating or defecating crock, and the product, urine or feces, is crock, and the desired location is crock, and the journey to get there is crock. So all four events have the same word. So then I use a schedule and I take the dog out frequently and I name the journey out crock. And when we get there, I announce we are now crock. And when he urinates or defecates, I name that crock. And when there's a product, I point that out and that he produced crock. And if he makes a mistake, I just say, this is not crock. And then I move it to the correct place and state with satisfaction, of course, now this is crock. I end up correcting litter problems, teaching the dog to go in a particular easy to clean and access spot, and being able to cue urination and defecation. So a lot comes from this little process. If I need to be able to separate the two acts, like collecting urine samples for diabetic animals, I name urination a different name and I repeat the process accordingly. With a deaf, blind dog, I would need to choose a cue that he can perceive. So either electronic or touch, probably. And if the dog, if he was just one of the things, if he was blind, you could use sound. If he's deaf, you can use something like a flashing light, pulsing light cue. But this dog happened to be both. So I can assign a simple touch or stimulus pattern to label the same four conditions that I normally use a word for. So to name crock, I could touch the skin of the animal and do something like this, crock, or crock, or whatever. You can pick anything, you just have to be consistent. And then I say, please let me know if you try this. I'm eager to hear how it works for you. Now I'll tell you a little story about my horse. In 2003, we needed to evacuate my horse and my assistant's horses for Hurricane Isabel. And when we arrived at the Colonial Down stables, where they generously volunteered to let us all bring our horses there, and we brought straw, but they would not allow us to use the straw because they used shavings for a mushroom place. So they'd let the horses use them and then they'd hand them off to the mushroom people. So we each got one bale of shavings. Now, I don't know how much you know about horses, but that's not enough to bed a horse. So I put the shavings in an area that I thought Sera would find comfortable. And then I explained to her that that was her sleeping area, and I showed her the corner that was for crock. And I showed her how to back into it. And then I asked her to crock, and she didn't feel like crocking right then, so that's fine. Well, then I needed to go off and help some other people that had just arrived with their horses. So I went out and helped them. And when I came back, about 15 minutes later, there were 3 piles of crock. 2 were correct and 1 was not. So I go up and I look at the 2 correct ones. Oh, that's crock. Oh, yeah, that's crock. And then I go over to the other one. I look at it and I go, Sera, this isn't crock. And I pick it up and I take it over and I dump it in this place. And then with satisfaction, I say, now that's Croc. So then I had to go help some more people with horses and I left. And when I came back quite a bit later, I looked and there were 3 piles. And 2 were in the correct place and 1 was in a different place. And when I went in, she watched me very carefully. And so I said, yeah, this is Croc and this is Croc. And the other 3 piles were, and this is Croc and this is Croc and this is Croc. But this one is not Croc. So I moved it over. Now it's Croc. I then clean them all up because I don't want Sera, in that, right? And we went to sleep, and the next morning I got up, and there was not a single error. And Sera did not make an error in using the correct spot for the 3 days that we were there. And Sera was the only horse that wasn't all covered with urine because of sleeping on shavings that were not sufficient and having her urine and feces mixed in with them. Now, what I should also say about that is, of course, I use name and explain, so I name whatever is happening that I think Sera might benefit from knowing about. So she never even lived in a stall. Up until this point, she had not lived in a stall. And she was only in the stall because of the hurricane. And so previous to this, she never had a reason to pay attention to that. But nonetheless, I named it when she would urinate or defecate in the field. So I would say, that's Croc, that's Croc, that's Croc. So in a way, she learned this whole idea from that single explanation in the 2 trials. So I know it sounds bizarre, but it works. It works. So let me know how it happens for you. All right, take care.